History remembers the generals, the battles, and the victories, but sometimes the greatest heroes walked on four legs. Welcome to A Dog's Devotion. I'm your host, Carla Basacki. During the darkest days of the First World War, when thousands of Canadians were leaving home for an uncertain future, one small white Spitz captured the hearts of an entire nation. His name was Muggins. He didn't wear a uniform, he didn't carry a weapon, but with two little donation boxes strapped to his back, he raised what would amount to hundreds of thousands of dollars for the Red Cross, wounded soldiers, prisoners of war, hungry children, and families in desperate need. Along the way, he became one of Canada's most beloved wartime heroes. Today, we're joined by acclaimed historian and biographer Grant Hayter-Menzies, whose remarkable book, Muggins, The Life and Afterlife of a Canadian Canine War Hero, uncovers the extraordinary true story of a dog whose courage, loyalty, and spirit inspired a nation, and whose legacy deserves to be remembered more than a century later. Well, Grant, thank you so much for joining me. I know you've had some back problems lately.
Yes, well, I'm able to sit up straight and in relatively little pain. So I think it's one of those things that happens to some of us who spend a lot of time in a chair at a desk.
I know.
So,
I was going to say, for someone who's a writer like yourself and you sit in a chair all the time, it's probably not the best ailment to have.
no, but this was well earned. It happened many years ago. I caught my mother-in-law when she was falling in a faint, and it was either that or letting her fall on a stone floor. So
Oh, gosh.
she sort of fell on me as I caught her, and I was actually in New York City for a book launch of my very first book, and so I was full of adrenaline, and I was also younger, and I didn't feel anything. A couple of weeks later, and I bent over to do something, and I couldn't get back up again. So it's been a nice almost 20 years of it. But yeah,
Well,
oh well.
I'm
Still
sorry
here.
you're in pain now, but you did a good thing for it.
Yes, I would do it again for her.
So you are really interesting. You've written a lot of books, really a lot of interesting books. And as I mentioned right off the top, we're doing a series now on working canines. I think a lot of people don't realize how important dogs were throughout all of history. But you wrote a book specifically about a certain dog named Muggins during World War I. And I had no idea about Muggins until I did some research, and that's what led me to you. But for the listeners, can you tell us who he was and why this story of Muggins has endured for more than 100 years?
Well, Muggins was born in about 1913 in Calgary, Alberta, province of Alberta, here in Canada, where I live. I live about 200 miles south of Calgary, in the home of a very wealthy man, William Roper Hull, who was a rancher, philanthropist. He was a property developer. He was all kinds of things, and he also founded what became a charitable organization helping children. And his wife Emmeline raised these white Spitz dogs, large Pomeranians, and Muggins was one of them. He made his way to Victoria, BC on Vancouver Island sometime before 1916 in the care of Mr. Hull's uncle, who was an elderly man, also a wealthy rancher who had retired to a fashionable part of Victoria. So Muggins was brought up in an atmosphere of comfort. He was really kind of a lapdog, a companion for an elderly man who was not well and who ultimately passed away in 1916. That's when Muggins seems to have changed hands, came into the care of a wonderful woman, Beatrice Woodward, who was from a completely different background to the people that Muggins had known. She came from West Midlands, working class, desperately poor background. She and her husband had come to Canada for a better life and had made a better life for themselves. And World War I had broken out, and Mrs. Woodward was a very active volunteer in raising funds for the war effort. And she somehow trained this former lapdog, this pampered pet, you might say, to collect donations from people he met in Victoria's Inner Harbor, mostly people coming off the ocean liners that were putting in to the harbor even during the war. And he had two little tins on a kind of a harness on his back with the slots to put coins in, and then she put a Union Jack kerchief on his neck, and she just would let him go up on the boats, and he would mingle with the people there, come back down to the harbor with his tins full of coins. Was trained to as well to collect coins from a little table that was set up in front of the Empress Hotel, a famous old hotel in Victoria, right on the harbor.
It is a beautiful hotel, the Empress Hotel in Victoria.
After my book came out, I purchased an unpublished photo of Muggins taken, I don't know by whom, on his table with the hotel in the background around 1917. And it's quite a wonderful setting because he became associated with the Empress. He was feted there. A lot of events were held in his honor at the Empress Hotel. He also traveled. He traveled with Mrs. Woodward to Vancouver, to Seattle. He visited military bases. He was given medals, not only in Canada, but in the U.S., ultimately about 8 medals for his work on behalf of the soldiers. I had written about another dog a few years before called Rags, who was the dispatch dog and mascot of the American 1st Division in World War I, and a real battlefield dog. I mean, he ran messages through horrible barrages and bombs going off all over the place, and he saved countless lives. But I believe and insist and state in my book that Muggins was no less a war dog because he worked very, very hard raising these funds and appeared to really enjoy doing the work. He loved.
Grant, I've seen some photos of him. Your book is terrific. For those who want to know the name of it, it's Muggins, The Life and Afterlife, the Canadian Canine War Hero. And I've seen the photos of the little tins on his back. They would get filled up and then she would empty them. Do you know how much money that dog raised with these tins?
It's said that the amount that is most commonly arrived at over time is about 250,000 Canadian dollars at the time. So that would now be, that would now be about 250,000 up to anywhere from 250 to 350 or 400,000 in modern currency. It's kind of hard to. This was during the war.
Yes,
but it was a lot. It was a great deal of money. I think it was more than any other collection dog had raised. And plus, he was so well known. People would actually arrange their schedules so that they put into Victoria Harbor just to meet him. Even people from as far away as Australia. So
they knew about Muggins and would come to see him.
They had heard the dog would meet you in the Inner Harbor and would come up to you with his tins. And he had so many wonderful traits. He was very serious about his work. He would let you pet him, but he was very, very serious. He would especially let you pet him if you put coins in his tins.
Interesting.
But he was going on the ships, running down to the gambling or the casino gambling rooms, the card playing area, and running around the tables where the men were playing cards and shaking his tins so you could hear the coins rattling, and then just sitting there waiting for them to put coins in. And if they still hadn't picked up the what he wanted, he would actually jump up on the table and sit in the middle of their cards to make them stop playing. They would notice him and give him coins. One time he showed up at the Red Cross, which was the main charity he worked for, the Red Cross headquarters, downtown Victoria, looking very sad. But several people saw this and just looking very, very downcast. They found that his tens were filled with bills, that very few coins, mostly bills. It was a huge amount of money that he'd been given. But because he couldn't feel the weight of the coins and he couldn't hear the coins.
No, he thought he failed.
And so they were comforting him and took off. They emptied his tins, and then they put them back on, and he went running back down to the harbor and his little table to see if he could make some more. So I really,
Nice.
Having had a Spitz myself, my beloved Freddie, I know how smart they are and how they notice things, they pay attention. And so they file away information. And I think that's probably, he was being very cognizant of his work. And again, I think he enjoyed his work. I not one for making an animal do something it doesn't want to do, but I really think he wanted to do this, much like police dogs, fire and rescue dogs.
How long did Muggins do this? Was he out there every day, all day?
Yeah, he was there a lot of the time. He was, unfortunately, his exposure to the public meant that he was kidnapped 3 times, and each time he was released and came back, but nothing could stop him. Mrs. Woodward was usually there with him, but he would often just go off and do his own thing. But he worked for, 16, 17, 18, 19, a good 3 years, almost 4 years, and met all kinds of dignitaries, met the Prince of Wales, the future brief King Edward VIII, who lauded him before everyone on behalf of the empire for all of his work. And then he, unfortunately, early in January 1920, Muggins, who had pneumonia in the past, developed it again, and it got too serious, and they did everything they could to save him, but he died in mid-January of 1920. So a very brief career, and I suggest in the book it might have been, there might have been a factor, was he worked in the cold? Was he left in the cold too much? Was he overworked? All of these things come to mind. It was so awful, really, really dreadful for Mrs. Woodward that she actually left Victoria. She was so heartbroken. She couldn't live there. And she ultimately, his body was preserved by one of the best taxidermists in Victoria. And she gave the taxidermed figure to an organization dealing with veterans in the city, but she never came back to live there.
She didn't. She was that distraught over the passing of Muggins.
Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah.
I myself have difficult time returning to places where our Freddie was happy, but also places where he lived, and of course Victoria is where he died. And it's you would think it would make it, you'd want to stay forever in a place where you had so much happiness with a beloved pet, but we were kind of happy to leave Victoria. A couple of years ago when we moved here to Alberta, there were just too many memories.
It's
happy
hard.
ones, but
Yeah.
So I get
now why she left. Now, I was reading that it's kind of interesting. So Muggins played a huge part in raising money for the Red Cross. Did an incredible job. Beautiful white. Is it called a Spitz? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, it's a Spitz.
Spitz.
It's a large
large Pomeranian. But then something interesting happened to the poor dog who was stuffed, because he disappeared for a while.
He did. In fact, at the time of my book's publication, it was believed that the taxiderm figure had disappeared, but it was actually rediscovered a couple of years ago in the attic of a home outside of Victoria. I and a couple of other associates involved in the research, Muggins research, went to have a look and see if this was Muggins, because there are many pictures of the taxidermy figure, and we had indeed identified him. He was missing an ear. He was very, very dirty. He'd been in an attic for about 60 years. So, but he was identifiable, and so I paid to have him restored by a taxidermist restorer on the BC mainland. And
what was Grant? Can I ask you what that was like? I mean, gosh, I've lost dogs. I can't imagine doing something like that to my dog.
I know it was. I think, and the fact that he was the stuffed figure continued to be used to raise money by the Red Cross. That, I mean, I tried not to make any judgments in my book, and I don't think it's my job to do that. But people can make of that what they will. It was for a good cause. And during World War II, people were giving money in his memory because they still had his harness with the little tins strapped to the figure, and people would put coins in there. And he was still raising funds. When I took him over to the restorer, he stayed in our house, in our condominium, for a couple of days before we drove over, and we had to cover him up because he sat in our living room, stood in our living room, and we had just lost Freddie. Now, Freddie and Muggins were completely different. Freddie was dark, and where Muggins was very icy white fur. Yeah. It was you'd come into the living room and there would be this dog that was the same size as Freddie standing there looking at you, and it was jarring. We had to cover him up, and then taking him over on the ferry to the mainland. The year before, we had taken Freddie several times in the car in the ferry over to the mainland for his chemotherapy treatments, and it was a little bit of a revisit of that, the anxiety and the concerns of that period. So it was wonderful when Muggins' restored figure was brought back. One of my associates, Paul Jenkins of the Red Cross, volunteered to bring the figure back over, because by that time we had Nico, our poodle that we had adopted. Mm-hmm. So we briefly set Muggins up in the living room, and of course Nico wanted to jump up, and he was barking at him and wondering why he wasn't.
Right. Grant, I have to tell you, you've done an incredible amount of research. It's very detailed. Where did you uncover all these remarkable facts and stories about Muggins?
Well, a lot of basic, very solid research was done by a retired University of Toronto professor, Sylvia Van Kirk, and she handed that over to me to basically take the lead and make a book out of it. And I found a lot of information through old newspapers. I just searching online, finding links to people still living who, for example, descendants of one of the two soldiers that Muggins raised funds for, who were in a German prisoner of war camp, and who were very grateful. They wrote a letter thanking him that was published in the local newspaper in Victoria for sending them food, because otherwise they would starve. So just finding all kinds of serendipitous, and that's the way it always has been with my work. But yeah, and it was, and lots of wonderful photographs and things that had been donated to the various archives in Victoria, and right, as well as a little bit of newsreel footage of Muggins in action that I found in the Royal BC archives.
Muggins sounded like such an amazing dog. Do you think people realize how useful dogs can be in times of crisis like this?
He was very much appreciated. People were concerned about welfare. People did. I know Mrs. Woodward frequently had to answer questions about that, about how was he treated, how was he was happy doing this, and so many. You have to see the pictures of him with the soldiers out at the Wounded Veterans Hospital. he was constantly jumping up and running around people. He was a happy boy. And it's almost as if knowing that he would have a short life, shorter than a dog normally would have, he did as much as he could. Because he spent his last Christmas Eve with those men before his illness happened. So I think everybody, and of course now that he's been kind of brought back to people's consciousness, I think there's a great deal of love for him in Victoria. So yeah, he's on display, and there's been a lot of press about him lately. So.
Where Grant is he on display? Is he in Victoria?
He's in a Legion headquarters in Victoria, and the Trafalgar Legion. It's actually the Legion headquarters where I took my Canadian citizenship. So years earlier, but he's been honored in other ways.
I'm so glad.
Yeah, it's Victoria is very much a dog loving town. They really love dogs, and people really care about their welfare there.
You know, it sounds like you and him had crossed paths. I mean, you lived in Victoria, you know the Empress, you actually walked many of the same streets that Muggins once did. Did that change the way you connected with this story? Did it feel a little more personal? And also because of your Freddie, did that make this a more personal project for you?
I wasn't interested in doing it at first because I usually choose my own projects. But when Sylvia shared her information with me, and her enthusiasm. And I, Freddie also, he accompanied me on many of the little walkabouts that I did to try to determine the distance that Muggins had to go in order to get to the Red Cross headquarters from the harbor. It felt like the right thing to do. And having a Spitz in my own life and my own heart, I felt like I understood him. So, and just before Freddie passed away, he helped me unbox copies of the book in October 2021, just a few days before he died. So
that's lovely. You also write a story about. I'm familiar with the Empress Hotel. I just love it there, as I mentioned. But there was something about Muggins who would wander around the Empress Hotel, and there was a policeman or somebody wanted him off the property, and then people complained. What was that story about?
He was actually not dog napped. He was picked up by the dog catcher, the stray dog catcher, who parked his. Muggins was allowed by the Empress Hotel to run around on their lawn. It's private property that they were fully able to do that legally. The pound guy parked his truck near the hotel, saw him running around, presumed that he was like a vagrant dog, and also because he wasn't wearing his collar. And so grabbed him. This caused a huge brouhaha, as well it should. People came up and said, "Put him down. He belongs here. This is Muggins. Don't you know who this is?" He said, "Well, he's wandering and he needs to be put in the pound." Muggins was just recovering from a chest ailment, and so it hurt him to be picked up like that. So he was yelping. Mrs. Woodward was called. She was, I think, in the hotel doing something. She came running down. The man wouldn't release him. She took off in her car to go to the mayor. The mayor was on his way down there. Police came up. The police were called. The harbor master saw this happening from his office. He loved Muggins very much. Came down and said, "See here, you need to put him down immediately." "I'm just doing my job," said the man. So a crowd gathered. A couple of returned veterans, came up and said, "That's our dog, the dog that helped us.
Wow.
You put him down now or we're going to knock you sideways to Sunday." At that point, the policeman came and said, "Mr. Smith, you are exceeding your authority. You put him down immediately." And that's how it was resolved. The other way it was resolved is that Mr. Smith was fired about a month later.
Love it.
Rejoice fortune, but Muggins was on private property, and there was no law breaking going on whatsoever. It just showed the story shows because there was quite a crowd. It was enough for the harbor master in his office way up at the top of the building to see this crowd massing around the lawn, trying to argue with this man who
I
was.
love it. That makes me feel so good that everybody was protecting Muggins.
I think when we want to think that people might not be all that great, the humans might not be that great. There really are more good humans than bad ones. So
I like to think so.
Yeah, we have to, don't we?
Yeah. After reading your book, for me, one of the themes throughout the whole thing is the emotional comfort that dogs provide. And being a dog owner and lover like yourself, you know that more than I do, or the same as I do. Do you think that Muggins was doing more than simply fundraising? You think he gave emotional support to the soldiers and people during a horrible time in our world?
So. He, again, very much like Rags, the other dog I wrote about, giving just by being there. There was one case where Muggins was taken out. He was taken out on a ship that was leaving, where it was full of Canadian soldiers who were on their way to the theater of war, and they pulled out of the harbor, and suddenly people realized, or Mrs. Woodward, of course, where's the dog? And they realized the men had taken him with them. They had to send a tender out to get him back, and they said, we just couldn't let go of him. He made us, it was like the last bit of home that we'll know for perhaps ever. And a picture that was used on the cover of the book shows him on one of these ships, and the way the men are looking at him. Dogs represent, as I've written before in some of my books, it's these animals, especially dogs, represented to these soldiers a remembrance of happier times in their lives when they'd had a dog on the farm or at whatever little town they came from, or the dog they left behind when they went to war. And this goes down to the very present day, when people have to leave them behind in order to go and serve a destiny bigger than themselves. But there's always the sadness of having to leave the beloved pet. And I think the men, as I mentioned, the photographs taken of him with the soldiers, especially the men who were recovering at Esquimalt Military Hospital, they just adored him. He was very serious about his role, took his job seriously, and they took him seriously, which is what I always ask people to do with animals. Take them seriously.
What do you hope readers take away after finishing the book?
To take animals seriously, especially those we share our lives with. They're not toys. We can have, ups and downs with them the way we do with our human family. They can have ups and downs with us, but that's how it is with the family. They're part of your life. It was one of the last things my father said to me before he passed away was, we always treated our animal family as seriously as we did you children. He said they were just as important as you were. And that's just the way I was brought up. So,
yeah, I agree. Good words.
Yeah. And I think that's important.
I think so too. And I think his legacy will, thanks to you, will continue. And hopefully people will read more about Muggins and other dogs who made such a difference in history for us, helping us as humans. The book, of course, is called Muggins, The Life and Afterlife of a Canadian Canine War Hero. That's a mouthful, Grant. But where can people find the book today?
It can be found, I guess. You can order it through your local bookstore, or you can go online. Heritage House is the publisher in Victoria. Just find Heritage House, Muggins. Just stay a Google search. And I don't know if you have a copy there, but that's what the book looks like.
So great. Well, thank you for writing this book. And we'll talk more because you've written quite a few books, and we'll get into that later. But for this one, I just really wanted to focus on Muggins, and I thank you for keeping his legacy alive and for informing not only Canadians, but people around the world, the work that he did. And it was really important.
It's a pleasure and an honor. Really.
Yeah. Thanks, Grant. You take care. Take care of your bag.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.